we're going to be at ease just for a few minutes. We got a few folks walking over, and I'm getting a copy made, so give us a few minutes, about 10 minutes, 3:10. Good afternoon, folks. We're going to bring to order the full committee of Judiciary Non-Civil, and going to ask Vice Chairman Smith to give a word of blessing before we get started.
If you would bow your heads with me. Lord Jesus, we come to you today, Lord, just thankful for you, Lord. Thankful for your blessings. Thank you for salvation that you sent to us, Lord, that we might have life more abundantly and life eternal. We ask, Lord, that you guide us, Lord. Give us your wisdom, Lord. Help us to look to you for guidance. We ask these things in your sweet and holy name. Amen.
Thank you, Representative Smith. Well, we've got 3 bills today to hear. Got Senate Bill 565, Senate Bill 360, and Senate Bill 461. We've just got a recent substitute that we're getting out to the members online for Senate Bill 565. And before we start, Chairman Strickland, I've got a bill in your committee this afternoon, so I brought you something. No, you can't keep it. That's perfect. That's perfect. I think I have a colleague here, Representative Saines. He's going to, since you're borrowing my gavel, he's going to give me a gavel. Is that true?
Yeah, yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. We recognize that Chairman Strickland may be a little intimidated given the weight of the bills we hear here versus what he might be used to. So we didn't want to further intimidate him by, paralleling this. So we have a gavel for you as well.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Very good.
Bring that one.
I'll bring this and pass it back to you. Representative McLaurin, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I just want to note for the record that despite everything that's happened to me in my 4 years, this is the single most demeaning moment I've had in the minority. But I enjoyed it.
All right. Very good. So we've got Senate Bill 565 here, and the LC that we're working off of is LC 490971S. Is that the one you've got, Chairman Strickland? If you would present the bill and tell us what you want us to know about. Also, please go into detail the latest change that we
Yes,
talked
sir.
about.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Senate Bill 565. If you recall, I believe it was 2 years ago. I think it was a Senate bill. I know I worked on. I can't remember if I did it as a House bill or a Senate bill that we passed at the direction of the First Lady that would create a way for those that victims that can prove that they committed a crime or are convicted of a crime as a direct result, very strong, of being a victim of human trafficking. And they could have, if they could prove that through a process we set, you see in this bill, this existing law, they could have that sentence vacated. When it's vacated, it's a very strong thing under the law in that you have as if the crime never was committed at all, never were convicted at all, and you even get your fines and fees that you paid reimbursed to you. So this bill comes from advocates that have worked on some of these cases for victims. And it's great to see, just side note here, some of the stuff that we pass, we pass these bills that say they're going to do great things. Well, there are actual victims in our state that have taken advantage of this law. I think all y'all were here and we passed that, and so it's impacted real people. This is a cleanup to that. A couple things that were brought to me as a result of advocates that worked on this. First part of the bill you'll see on page 2 talks about the fact that the existing law says that if it is a misdemeanor conviction, you have to wait till 6 months after you finish your sentence to ever petition. This is current law. If it's been a felony, you have to wait till 1 year after you complete your sentence to petition for a vacatur. And this eliminates that waiting period. The policy behind this is if you are truly someone that committed a crime simply because you were a victim of human trafficking, why should there be a waiting period at all? And so we eliminate that waiting period where any time following a conviction, someone can apply for this vacatur. The second part of this bill, and this is where the substitute comes in, starting on page 4 and leading into section 2, the other issue brought to me by advocates is we don't know where to get the money from to reimburse folks. And we're getting different reactions from different jurisdictions because as you guys know, when the fines are collected by a clerk, they go different places. And so I worked on the Senate side trying to codify a way through CJCC that we'd have coordinating of having the funds reimbursed. And the Senate version basically allowed all these folks to coordinate together and figure it out. In the meantime, CJCC and Mr. Neal's here, if you want to hear from him as well, have worked on some better language that says exactly where the money comes from. And you'll see on line 76, it confirms it comes from the Georgia Crime Victims Emergency Fund. And then it sets forth the process in Section 2 as to how that money is obtained. And it has them coordinate other departments that are involved in this as well. And there's other language they included on page 5 that just confirms this is a debt under Georgia law. It allows for collection of the funds and the funds to go between the agencies. And so I'll tell you, the language you see in this sub on pages 4 and 5 is a result of getting the folks together that have these funds to make sure we have it in Georgia law, the best clear way to get them reimbursed. And so with that, Mr. Chairman, that's the bill. And again, if you have more questions on Section 2, Mr. Neal's here as well.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will recognize Mr. Neal, but also want to recognize Judge Burt Guy for being here. Thanks for coming. It's always good to have folks from down south visit us at the Capitol. And
It's his first time at the Capitol, I think.
yeah, it is. It is. I've never seen this gentleman in this building before, but good to have you again. Mr. Neal, would you mind coming up and giving us a line by line through this and kind of work us through how these dollars are going to flow, because I see some references to other code sections.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I feel like I'm back in the legislature again, going through a bill. So initially, when the bill was introduced, it had CJCC being responsible for promulgating rules and regulations on how other agencies would return those fines and fees, and we felt like that was not appropriate for us to promulgate rules and regulations for other agencies to abide by. And with conversations with the chairman, the version that passed out of the Senate took us out completely and had the victim having to go to each entity and get those fees recovered through the entities. Our executive leadership talked about that process. We are a victim-centered organization. We decided that we didn't like the idea of victims having to go through those kind of challenges to get those returned, and we came up with what we believe is a good solution for the victims being able to get their fees reimbursed in one location, and that would be through the Crime Victims Emergency Fund. They would need to supply us with obviously the court order and the documentation on how much they had paid in fines and fees, and once we were able to verify that, we would simply reimburse them for the fines and fees. The section of the bill in oh, and by the way, we still will work with on line 91, 2, and 3. We'll still work with the Board of Pardon and Parole, Community Supervision, and Corrections and Administrative Office of the Courts to promulgate rules and regs on how this will be done. But we'll be working jointly with them to come up with those protocols. The CJCC will be given the authority, the authority to provide these funds in. Wait a minute. Let me.
Mr. Neal, before
Yes.
you go into that, would this include like probationary fees, and if there are any of those, or
It would.
Okay, all right.
So line 86 shows that this is in Chapter 15, which is the statute, the authority for CJCC in Chapter 15. Line 86, subject to available funds, any cents vacated pursuant to Code Section 171021. Fines and fees paid by the defendant under such sentence shall be returned to the defendant in the amount paid by the defendant. So that gives us the statutory authority to be able to make that payment to those survivors. Line 95 is where it shows that the reimbursement of those fees and fines would constitute a debt owed to the state. That would be the authority for us now to go to those entities that receive the fines and the fees from the survivor and get reimbursed for those fines and fees. Starting with line 98, it deals with those secondary entities. So the clerk of the court, for example, distributes those fines that they collect to multiple secondary entities, they would be able to go to those secondary entities and get a reimbursement of those fees and fines from the secondary entities. And then any money that is returned pursuant to paragraph 1 of subsection D of this code will be returned to the Crime Victims Emergency Fund. So our goal in the end, of course, is to not be a burden on the Crime Victims Emergency Fund, but instead allow that Crime Victims Emergency Fund be the pass-through that facilitates a smooth process for these survivors to get those fines and fees reimbursed.
Very good. One question, does anybody from the committee have any questions with regard to this additional language? The 98 through 103, that was in the previous version, and this D1 portion, I think, is a new piece. Let me ask you this. Any payment made on 95, I mean, I think I know the intent of the bill is to say any payment made under this code section, that'd be payment by the defendant here, right?
This would be any payment. This would be a payment made by the Crime Victims Compensation Fund to the survivor.
Okay.
So any payment that we make to the survivor will create a debt that is owed by the entity who originally received those fines and fees from the survivor.
Sure.
That creates the ability for us at CJCC to recover those funds from the entity that initially received them.
Very good. We just what I'm just trying to figure out, do we need to distinguish the payment from the defendant? Do we need to distinguish that from the payment made by the CJCC or the excuse me, the Victims Impact, the Georgia Crimes Victim Emergency Fund? Do you think we need to?
Not being an attorney, I will yield to the attorneys on that. I believe since this is in the crime victims or in the CJCC code section, it is referring specifically to any funds paid by CJCC, and I think that would be sufficient. But I'll certainly yield to the legal minds on that.
That was my question. As long as it's referencing, it says any payment made under this code section 15-17, as long as it's not referencing the payment made by the defendant, I think we're going to be okay. And having just got this, I just want to make sure we don't. Anybody have another opinion on that? What do you think?
My only thought is because it has the language on line 95, any payment made under this code section, that's just code section 17-15-17. And so that should limit it, because you have the law we're looking at amending here, 17-10-21.
That's all I need right
on
there. That's very good. Well, thank you, Mr. Neal. I appreciate you coming and explaining that piece. I think that's a better means, or a more clear means of describing how this money is to be paid back versus what we had in the prior LC. We've got 2 people signed up to testify in favor of this bill. First, we have Beatrice Shackle from Frontline Policy Action. All right, let's go on to the second one. That'll be Camilla. Oh, come on up, ma'am. Zola Fagari.
Yeah, this is Camille Zulfagari for Street Race. We've worked with
You
many.
can talk into that. We've
sorry.
got folks on
Yes.
the internet. They won't be able to hear you.
Yeah, we've worked with many of the attorneys who have brought these on behalf of survivors, and we're very grateful to Strickland and to the CJCC, to Director Neal, for bringing this bill.
All right, very good. Thank you. I'm going to give the last call for Beatrice Shackle. All right. Well, Mr. Chairman, I do appreciate you bringing this bill as well. If someone is sort of forced to commit a crime, and under duress of human trafficking, then we certainly should make it a swift and immediate vacation and make them whole, because they say they can't help it, right? So I thank you very much for bringing the bill. And Ms. Beatrice, would you like to speak?
Yes, thank you. Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Beatrice Schockel. I'm the Director of Alliances for the Frontline Policy Action. And I'd like to thank you all for listening and hearing this bill today. We stand in support of SB 565. As you know, Frontline Policy Council, Frontline Policy Action, one of our 7 core values is to protect the dignity of every human being. And so that means fighting for the value and the rights of every and worth of every human person. And so this bill reaffirms the dignity of victims of human trafficking who were forced into crimes that they didn't commit in the first place. And so they were convicted. And, the true crime happened when they were trafficked, and that alone has caused so much trauma. And, we just ask to not make this any more difficult on those victims, on those victims who were human trafficked, and just allow their conviction to be vacated right away. I thank you guys for your consideration on this bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Schockel. Chairman Strickland, along the lines of that payment on line 95, would you be amenable to if we were to just say any payment made by the fund under this section, so adding the words by the fund, just so that we don't have any ambiguity, and pass it out with something like that?
I think that'd be fine. Just looking back, line 89, line 90 use that same language, made from the fund. And so I think that language would be consistent with the code section. So as long as Legislative Council agrees, then that sounds good to me.
She's online.
Okay.
Ms. Holly, would you unmute yourself? Do you think that if we made the, and it doesn't even necessarily be on lines 95, if we made the amendment to add the words after made from the fund or by the fund, would that be in line with the language elsewhere in the legislation? No news is good news, I guess. That would be, she's got that. That would be consistent. Okay, very good. Her mic must not be working. Well, Mr. Chairman, I appreciate you again bringing it. So at this point, we've got, would be a good point for a motion. I'll take a motion on this bill.
Mr. Chairman, throw up time. Make a motion. Motion to pass.
Got a move to pass? We got a second. All right. Now we got the bill before the committee, and now it'll be time for amendments. And I'm going to offer up that amendment on line 95 to add the words after made from the fund, the word from the fund, and before under. So it would read, any payment made from the fund under this code section shall create a debt due and owing to the state. Do I have a motion on the amendment? Got a motion? Got a second?
Second.
All those in favor of the Burchett amendment signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Oh, the amendment passes. All right, so we now have the bill before the committee as amended. We've got a motion and a second, and I'm going to call the vote. All those in favor of Senate Bill 565 LC 490971S as amended signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Very good. The bill passes on the rules.
I'll see you shortly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, thank you.
All right, let's call Senate Bill. Let's see what we got on our. We got a 360. Has anybody in the room not signed up to a bill that they intend on speaking to or against? Okay, so nobody's. All right, so let's go to Senate Bill 360 with Senator Sheila McNeil.
I'll explain her if you'll let her come to this point.
Yes, yeah, come on up and you can. You ain't got anywhere to be right this minute. Okay, all right.
Thank you for hearing us.
Yes, thank you for coming, Senator McNeil. So I've got Senate, just to be for clarity, I've got Senate Bill 360 is LC 490832S SES. That's what we got. Okay, very good. Well, Senator McNeil, if you would explain your bill, and then we'll get to asking questions likely, or maybe not.
This issue came to my aide, who works with my constituents, Leslie, and she's worked with this mother of Colton from the beginning of the incident. I'd like for her to speak on the issue since she has firsthand knowledge. I want to say we must protect the vulnerable and for those who cannot speak for themselves. We also spoke with our local Department of Family and Children's Services, and who echoed the problem of the lack of punishment for those who abuse disabled minor children and the elderly. With that said, I'd like to introduce Leslie Manuki and my aide.
Hi, how are you? I got a call from a mother in the district in Camden County. She was distraught that her minor child, who has a trach and a feeding tube, he was hit by her boyfriend. You could clearly see the bruises on this child's face. He's nonverbal, cannot communicate, can't speak for himself. He was arrested. He was bonded out a few hours later. The punishment has been minimal. Since that has happened to Colton, his medical condition has now been listed as terminal. So that's a memory this child will have before he passes away, that he was hit for no reason and abused and couldn't defend himself. I just feel like we need to do more to protect these children, and this is something that kept me up for nights looking at this picture of this child. I wanted to turn this over to Robert Smith, who's with us for the attorney.
Well,
who's
let
been
me
working
get
with us.
through with you all, and we'll call. We've got him signed up, so we'll call him up. I appreciate your testimony, Ms. Leslie. And just for clarity purposes for the committee, what this bill is doing is a person is convicted of the lines 46 through 48 are the opportune words that change the punitive imprisonment to not less than 10, no more than 30 for cruelty to children in the first and or second degree for children that are disabled. That's the impact and effect of this legislation. So, Senator McNeil, thank you for bringing the legislation. I got a few questions beeping for you. Representative Saints.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Senator, for bringing this worthwhile piece of legislation to the committee. I understand the intent of the legislation is, of course, to address those with physical or mental impairment, as noted on line 14. I had a question, a friendly one, regarding lines 16 to 17. Shall not include any person who is addicted to the use of any drugs or illegal or federally controlled substance, or who has an addiction to the use of alcohol. Of course, this doesn't take away any protections that are already in Georgia law, but if that individual were to have a physical or mental disability, and let's say, my thought is with our human trafficking in the state of Georgia, where those with mental disability may be more vulnerable to being victims in that area, is it a disqualifier if they also have that addiction in addition to? I'm guessing the intent is to not categorize a disabled minor exclusively on on a drug or alcohol dependency, but is it a disqualifier if they have the predetermined mental or physical disability?
Does it read that way for you? I don't know.
I'm asking.
I've not seen that, but if
That was put
Yeah.
in by the attorneys. That's
Yeah.
a question for her.
That
Robert.
was the attorney, that was not what we did, but the attorney that saw it added that.
And
So,
he can answer
and if there's a
that.
problem, maybe.
Okay, we'll ask Mr. Smith when he comes up to testify. Does anybody else have any questions for the senator or the aide? All right, very good. Well, we got one blinking. Representative McLaurin.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman, and completely understood in terms of the policy purpose of this. I mean, it's tragic. It's one of the issues that this committee deals with. It's like so far beyond, thinking about how human beings should treat each other, right? That it's the kind of thing where you have to have sympathy and want to respond in a way that makes sense. And in general, the role I play in this committee, one of the roles I try to play is to make sure that we're always making sentences proportional, right, to the crimes that are committed. One question I've got is, right now, the way this is written, second-degree cruelty would be included. And that's, as far as I understand it, criminal negligence, which, could be something as simple as like a hot car, I'm imagining a lot of ways, again, serious stuff, but where somebody could be negligent, not meaning the worst state of mind, not intentionally, not recklessly, but negligently doing something like a
Maybe it
mistake.
had enough 2 drinks.
Sure, yeah, exactly. You
They
can
did it,
imagine.
yeah.
It's not like we would condone conduct by an adult in this way, but we recognize that it's, on the grand scheme of things, it could be sort of on the lower rung. So, let's say somebody does that, and then, the provision for second degree cruelty is causes cruel or excessive physical or mental pain. And children come in all different shapes and sizes and backgrounds, right? And that's probably subjective, and which it should be. But I'm just trying to imagine a scenario which wouldn't seem too far off for me for an adult to make a mistake, a bad mistake, that causes an excessive amount of mental anguish. But now you're talking a 10-year mandatory minimum, right? And I get that it's not, doesn't have the mandatory minimum language like it says can't be probated or whatever, but it'd be a minimum of a 10-year sentence. So the question that I've got is, has there been any discussion of proportionality, like in those circumstances, particularly with second degree cruelty? Why a 10-year sentence is mandated in these cases as opposed to 5 or the lower amount that's there for second degree, which is currently 1 to 10.
You mind let me read this. This was from the attorney.
Sure.
Will Johnson. He said, in conversations with the defense attorney lobbyist, because this includes negligence, we have agreed to drop the mandatory minimum requirement of the enhancement. So strike last sentence and, can't read that, lines 50 and 52.
And it was done.
And it was done. So
Okay, and I understand that to
I
mean
agree
that,
with you.
right.
I mean, that makes sense.
So
If it's a one-time, we happen to know this guy was constantly doing it, so it makes us
Right.
a lot more passionate. But I can see where it might just happen one time where they lose it and it would never happen again.
And so I guess, the first degree bar is, let's see here, it's maliciously causes, right? And that's a much different state of mind than negligence. As we discussed, you can imagine scenarios where, look, nobody's excusing an adult behaving in that way, but in a way where you make that mistake and now suddenly judge doesn't have discretion, it's 10 years,
Right. Yeah.
So I guess maybe my thought for the committee would be at least to consider removing the second degree portion from the new crime and, keeping in the first degree, because I think if you're maliciously acting and you know who the victim is and they fall in this category, that's a pretty elevated state of mind, right? The negligence part, I think, is what
Yeah.
concerns me.
I wouldn't have a problem with that.
Okay, thank you.
Representative Montana.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. As many of y'all know, I'm not an attorney. So a lot of these things, first, second, third degrees, I'm not very familiar with by how they work. So I'm gonna ask the committee, because I have a means that I want to try to find out what these things mean, because maybe it's good, maybe it isn't. I think my question is this, and if y'all could help me here. I know we got several lawyers here and several in the crowd. When we think about the people who take care of disabled children, whether it be a special needs teacher like my wife, who loves her kids an incredible amount, She loves them. It's her passion. It's what she does. But maybe people who work in the nursing field and all these others, right? I can tell you the stories of my wife coming home where some of these kids are up to, I believe, 24 years old that are in the school systems because they don't age out until they're about 24 years old. They're big kids. They're big kids is what they are. And so they're going through life. They're growing up. They're 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, all the way up to 24 years old. And they're going through the normal growth of a young man or young woman. And they're kind of thrown, and sometimes these kids will throw a temper tantrum or something like that. I don't know what a first or second degree means, but we want to make sure that we're kind of accounting for if a administrator needed to, and then I guess I want to make sure, because a mandatory minimum of 10 years may be too high. How does that work? I don't know. Is that I'm trying to formulate the question, but I'm not legal enough to understand what to ask potentially, but I want to make sure that we don't accidentally punish teachers, nurses, and caretakers in a situation where they would or wouldn't have control.
Let's I'll tell you what, let's ask Robert Smith from prosecutor account, Pat to come up, and yeah, go right there, that's fine. And give your testimony, maybe clear up what Representative Montana was trying to articulate here. And just to one point, when it says not less than 10 years, that means the judge has no discretion. It says he just has to 10 years is the minimum. All right. And go into first and second degree. It's a little further up if you look in your on your sheet there. First degree is on lines 22, and second degree is on lines 25, and it gives you outlines for you what the crime is and what the punishment is.
And one more question before y'all get started, because it may have just answered my question. This is only for multiple offenses. This would be, or would this be? If I'm reading up here, it says, person convicted of offense in the third degree shall be punished for the misdemeanor upon the first, or would this not fall into that same thing?
Well, what the purpose of this bill does, I'm not on right now.
You're not on? Try the next one next to you, because I got you on.
There you go. I'm on now. Thank you for Robert Smith, General Counsel at the Prosecuting Attorneys Council. And first thing I want to make sure everybody understands, William Johnson is our resource prosecutor for elder abuse and juvenile crimes. He's been assisting the good senator and her staff in this bill. So I'm occasionally he's throwing to me information to make sure I say what I'm about to say correctly. What the thrust of this bill is that we already have a robust statute when it comes to cruelty to children, and that's what this section is. What this does is take those victims, those children who are disabled, and enhances the punishment for those who commit first degree and second degree acts of cruelty towards them. It basically defines what a disabled minor is, or disabled child, using the federal definition from the ADA. Plus, and I will admit there is some additional language. I checked with Will, and as the senator indicated, some of this language was added by legislative counsel on the Senate side, specifically the reference to drugs. So I don't know exactly where it came from, but that was a policy decision made by the Senate to put the bill here, put that language in here. But the intent was to use the federal standard for disability from the ADA to make that parallel. And then it goes in and talks about if you commit the offense of cruelty to children against a disabled child, not against other children will be or handled in the current code, but as to a disabled child for first and second degree, you're now going to have an enhanced sentence. And from what I understand from earlier, it sounds like there may be a decision or an agreement to remove second degree and make this only towards first degree. That's a policy decision. That's a decision that is way above my pay grade for you guys to make that decision. But to try to answer also Representative Montan's question about what kinds of things we're looking at, first degree, and then I'm going to just reading you the code, is somebody who maliciously, so I have to prove that the defendant acted with malice and intentionality, and they have malice when they commit this act. Then they cause a child under the age of 18 cruel or excessive physical or mental pain. So basically, we're talking. There's something. It's not. There's several different elements to that. And I'm making sure I read and go back up one more about first degree. When such person willfully deprives the child of necessary sustenance to the extent the child's health or well-being is jeopardized. So that's kind of what a first degree is. The second degree, which Representative McLaurin was talking about, is someone with criminal negligence. It means that they had a duty to do something or not do something towards the child, and then there was a breach of that duty. And not necessarily from a willful act, but from their failure to comply with that act. That's criminal negligence. And then they call that child under the age of 18 cruel and excessive physical or mental pain. Now remember, first degree you need to have malice. Second degree is just negligence. And then the third degree is when you allow the child to witness certain acts. So then third degree is not covered by the new code. By this bill, it's only first and second degree, and then it sounds like second degree may be removed. I don't know exactly, but specifically when it comes to first degree, that's what this bill would do, was that if you do that towards, if the prosecutor is able to convince a jury or a judge beyond a reasonable doubt that the person did this, and then was able to prove that the child was a disabled minor, there would be a different sentencing structure. That's what this bill does.
Representative Montana, did that answer your question?
It did. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Smith, for that. That does clear it up. That satisfies me. You know, again, as a non-lawyer here, I don't understand until y'all explain it to me, and that makes perfect sense. So I understand that, and I understand it's more of this cruelty kind of stuff. So I just want to make sure, and thank you so much, and appreciate that.
So secondary criminal, the negligence could be if you don't feed your child.
Right.
You don't feed them, you don't clothe them. To the point that it causes, what are the I want to use the correct words here, cruel or excessive physical or mental pain, and to the point that was made earlier is it's a subjective sort of standard. As I understand it, you take the victim how they come. It's however the victim, it's not. What would be cruel to one person is not cruel to the other. So if someone is one disabled and is more sensitive to having that outcome of severe or cruel or excessive mental pain, that's you get you get the punishment regardless.
That's right. That's right.
So that I just wanted to point that out.
Good bill. Thank you,
Representative Smith.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Robert, appreciate you coming and being here, and thank you, Senator, for your diligent work on this. Two questions here, and one's more of just I guess a statement that I would like for Robert to weigh in on. But the meaning of disabled minor, is there anywhere else in the code that you know of that we have disabled minor defined as?
I'm not aware of such. And I know that Mr. Johnson worked with Legislative Council on the Senate side to be able to craft this definition with the intent of it tracking the ADA language.
Okay, all right. I just know I believe there's a provision in Georgia law allowing for those individuals that are disabled, mentally handicapped, that they can continue on in school until a certain age. So just for uniformity among the law and our definitions and preferring that, that was a question I had. I mean, I'm going to support the bill, obviously, because I think it's good policy. I was curious about that question. Yes, I'm sorry.
You good?
Yeah. I mean,
okay.
I just had.
Let's do this. Senator McNeil, we've got a few questions about the bill. Are you okay if we work offline with you on these policy decisions, and then making sure that definition aligns with what else is in the code? It would be maybe helpful if we could get in touch with the attorney that's been working with them, and just answer some of these questions, and then we'll take this matter up in another meeting. Is there any other questions that we can flesh out here besides those that have been asked, so that we don't do this again? All right. Well, it looks like Chairman Ballinger also has a question. So I'll ask Chairman Ballinger if you would get with the author, and let's see if we can get your question answered regarding the single physical limitation. I appreciate you coming, Senator McNeil, and we'll work diligently on this and see if we can't get this up in the next meeting. If you would work with the representatives that had questions, and Robert, would you help out with that?
I will, and because I'm not part of the Zoom, I know that Chairman Ballinger did have a question. Could that be forwarded on to me so that way we can have a response for her?
Certainly.
Please? Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Thank you. What I would say is, Robert, the questions that we've had, can you relay those to the lawyer she's working with, and then see if they will get in touch with my office, and let's see if we can get the language cleaned up a little bit. Okay?
Thank you for making it better.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Senator. All right, we have one more, and we've got Senator Dixon in Senate Bill 461. Leader Dixon, it's good to have you in Judy Non-Civil, and you've got a one-page bill, first one that's come, so we're also happy to see that. So if you wouldn't mind explaining what your bill does, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee members. Glad to be here with you today with a simple bill. Today I bring before you a bill that I'm carrying on behalf of the Governor and First Lady at Senate Bill 461. Building on the initiative that the First Lady and the Grace Commission have championed in the fight against human trafficking, this bill simply brings the offense of human trafficking into a list of offenses only bailable by a Superior Court judge. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Just for clarity, section line 30, the addition is all the human trafficking. That 16-5-46 is the human trafficking code. Is that correct?
That is correct, Mr. Chairman.
All right, Representative Smith.
At the appropriate time, Mr. Chairman.
Appropriate time is now.
Yes.
Got a move, do pass. Got a second on Senate Bill 461. LC 480466-EC. Is that what you have?
That is correct, Mr. Chairman.
All right. We've got a motion and a second on a due pass. Are there any amendments? Hearing no amendments, I call a question. All those in favor of Senate Bill 461 signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
All of those opposed? Hearing none, the measure passes on the rules.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee members.
Thank you, Mr. Leader. With that, we will adjourn. Thank you all for your attendance, and I appreciate you being here.